Most Japanese cars don't die because the engine is weak. They die because owners ignore a few simple things for too long. The difference between a Japanese car that dies at 150,000 miles and one that reaches 500,000 is usually not the engine itself. It's the maintenance owners skip, the fluids they trust for too long, and the tiny warning signs they ignore until a cheap fix turns into a massive repair. Most Japanese cars do not die because the engine was bad. They die because owners follow lazy intervals, ignore cheap maintenance, and wait too long to fix small problems. That is why one Toyota makes it to 500,000 miles while another one struggles much earlier. If you want viewers to stay, start with pain. Tell them the engine is not the weak point. The weak point is owner behavior. That immediately makes the topic personal because it sounds like the damage is preventable and the viewer may already be making the mistake. The first habit that separates long-life cars from dead ones is oil discipline. Many owners proudly stretch oil changes because the manual sounds generous, but long-mileage survivors are usually owned by people who change oil earlier and more consistently, not later. Oil is cheap compared to engine wear. Once old oil stays in too long, the additives break down, contamination rises, and internal surfaces stop getting the protection they need. The damage is slow, silent, and exactly the kind of thing viewers ignore until it becomes expensive. That is why the smartest owners build a simple rule. Change it on time, use quality oil, and never gamble with long intervals just because the car still feels okay. Engines usually do not warn you before oil neglect starts taking life away. Now here comes the maintenance myth that ruins transmissions. Lifetime fluid. It sounds premium, intelligent, and convenient. That is exactly why so many drivers believe it. But high-mileage ownership usually comes from people who service transmission fluid before trouble shows up. The danger with transmission fluid is simple. When drivers wait until shifting feels bad, whereas often already started, the longer the fluid stays tired, the more heat, contamination, and friction build inside one of the most expensive systems in the entire vehicle. Retention trick here. Always compare cheap maintenance to painful repair cost. A routine drain and fill sounds boring, but a slipping transmission sounds terrifying. Viewers stay when they feel the money risk. So make the cost difference visual and emotional. Coolant is another silent killer because people think if the engine is not overheating today, the system must be fine. But coolant ages. Chemistry changes, and once protection drops, corrosion and overheating risks start building long before the dashboard tells you anything. This is where smart owners get ahead. They treat coolant service like prevention, not reaction. And if you want stronger storytelling, connect it to the thermostat because that tiny part creates one of the best fear-based contrasts in the whole video. A thermostat is cheap. A blown head gasket is not. That one contrast alone can hold attention because viewers instantly understand the risk. You are no longer talking about fluid. You are talking about how a tiny neglected part can destroy the whole engine. Now move into one of the most dangerous knowledge gaps in car ownership: timing belt versus timing chain. Many people do not even know which one their engine has, and that ignorance alone can turn a healthy vehicle into scrap with one snapped belt. This topic keeps retention high because it feels urgent. If the viewer owns a belt-driven engine and has never checked the interval, they feel immediate tension. That tension keeps them watching because now the video sounds like it might prevent a catastrophic mistake. A timing chain removes one major risk, but a timing belt demands respect. Belts age even when the car seems fine. And on interference engines, failure does not create a minor inconvenience. It creates bent valves, destroyed timing, and a repair bill that shocks people. After that, shift into brake fluid because viewers rarely expect it to matter for longevity. But that is exactly why it works as a retention point. Surprise maintenance topics make people think, what else have I been ignoring that could quietly damage the car? Brake fluid absorbs moisture over time. That moisture lowers performance and can corrode important parts from the inside. The brakes may feel okay until the day they do not. That delayed consequence makes it a perfect mid-video warning segment. And while you are near the brakes, mention caliper slider pin lubrication. That is one of those tiny annual habits that nobody gets excited about, yet it prevents sticky brakes, uneven wear, and expensive repairs that feel unfair because they could have been so easy to avoid. Now hit them with a $0 habit. Never let the fuel tank live near empty all the time. This works well because viewers love free fixes. And free habits with expensive consequences almost always outperform boring maintenance talk in audience retention. Running near empty too often can force the system to deal with the oldest, dirtiest fuel environment at the bottom of the tank. Even if the pump survives for a while, repeated stress and contamination are exactly the kind of long-term abuse that shortens component life. The viewer should feel this section as a simple rule. Above a quarter is safe, below a quarter too often is gambling. That kind of clean, memorable rule is what helps long-form content stick because the audience remembers the habit even after the video ends. Now we get into a huge one for long engine life, the first 5 minutes after a cold start. This is a strong retention section because almost every driver does this every day, and most never think of it as a wear event. On a cold start, the oil is not fully circulated yet, clearances are different, and the engine is in one of its least comfortable moments. That is why how you drive immediately after startup matters far more than how aggressively you drive once everything is warm. The retention-friendly message here is simple. Do not floor it cold, do not sit idling forever like it is 1985, and do not treat the engine like it is fully ready the second it starts. Gentle warm-up driving feels boring, but it protects wear better than myths do. Now add another idea that instantly makes the video feel smarter. Highway miles are easier on a car than brutal stop-and-go city life. That one contrast helps viewers understand why some high-mileage cars look shockingly healthy while lower-mileage city cars feel worn out early. If the car lives in a salt state, rust becomes the villain. This section should feel scary because rust can kill the whole vehicle even when the engine is still excellent. That is one of the biggest emotional twists in the long-life Japanese car story. That is why annual undercoating matters in the right climate. And not just any product. Viewers stay engaged when you explain that the wrong undercoating can trap moisture, while the right type actually protects cavities, rails, wheel wells, and vulnerable seams. This is a perfect place for a harsh contrast, a yearly preventive treatment versus losing the entire frame. Once the audience sees that math, they understand long-life ownership is not just about engine oil. It is about protecting the whole car from the environment. Next comes one of the easiest ways owners sabotage otherwise reliable Japanese cars, using generic fluids where the car wants specific chemistry. This is especially dangerous in transmissions, CVTs, and systems that are sensitive to friction behavior. Compatible is not always the same as ideal. And in a high-mileage vehicle, close enough can become a very expensive sentence. The more miles a car has, the less room there is for the wrong fluid to behave badly without you noticing. At the same time, not every factory part is automatically superior in every category. That nuance improves trust. Some filters and oils are about specification, not brand worship. So the key message is to understand which parts demand exactness and which simply demand quality. Now give them the habit that matters more than almost everything else. Fix problems the week they appear. This line works because every car owner knows the feeling of postponing a noise, leak, or warning light and hoping it somehow stays small. A cheap oxygen sensor can become a ruined catalytic converter. A small coolant leak can become an overheated engine. A torn boot can become a failed axle. Long-life owners are not magical people. They are just the ones who refuse to procrastinate cheap repairs. This is the philosophy section of the video, and it is important for retention because it changes the content from a list into a mindset. Lists are forgettable. A mindset is memorable. Japanese cars last when owners think early, not late. Now recap the money logic. Maintaining a car for extreme mileage always sounds expensive until you compare it to replacing a car too early or paying for catastrophic neglect. Suddenly, prevention becomes the cheaper and smarter identity for the viewer. A big reason viewers leave early is that videos sometimes hide the reward too long. So here, remind them of the payoff. Smoother engine life, lower total ownership cost, fewer major breakdowns, and a car that stays useful long after most people would have replaced it. To keep retention high late in the video, reopen the fear loop one more time. Say this clearly. The biggest threat is not one dramatic event. It is small neglect repeated for years. That line helps the whole video feel connected from beginning to end. Then give a simple actionable summary. Early oil changes, service transmission fluid, fresh coolant, timing awareness, brake fluid care, quarter tank rule, gentle cold starts, rust protection, correct fluids, and instant attention to new problems. That is the survival formula. Viewers also stay longer when they feel the content applies to them specifically. So mention Toyota, Honda, Mazda, Subaru, and Nissan-style ownership situations in visuals and examples, but keep the advice practical enough that any careful Japanese car owner can use it. Finish with identity, not just information. Say that 500,000-mile owners are not lucky. They are disciplined. That line is powerful because it gives the viewer a role to step into. And when the audience feels a new identity, they remember the video longer. If you want your Japanese car to outlive expectations, stop thinking in terms of waiting for problems and start thinking in terms of protecting systems before they fail. That is how ordinary Toyotas and Hondas become the cars people talk about for decades.